Jonas Hale had lived alone on his ranch for so long that silence felt like an old friend. He woke before sunrise every day, fed his cattle, repaired fences, cleaned tools, and checked the land that stretched out in every direction like an ocean of dry grass. The desert wind was often the only voice he heard. It whispered across the sand, brushed the edges of the barn, and carried the scent of distant rain that never came. He was a middle-aged man with strong hands and a tired face, someone who had lived more years in quiet than he had planned. He did not hate people, but life had pushed him into a corner where keeping to himself felt easier. He rarely visited the town nearby, and when he did, he only spoke enough words to buy supplies. He avoided long conversations, and he especially avoided speaking to women. It wasn't fear or dislike. It was simply that he had grown out of practice, out of rhythm, out of comfort. He felt he had nothing left to offer anyone, especially someone who might look at him with expectation. The ranch gave him peace. It gave him purpose. It gave him routine. And routine had kept him safe from thinking too much. On one quiet evening, with the sun dropping behind the faraway cliffs, Jonas was repairing a loose fence wire near the southern end of his land. The sky was turning orange and purple, the kind of colors that made the whole desert look like a painting. He wiped sweat from his forehead, straightened up, and glanced toward the cliffs. That was when he noticed something unusual. Faint lights flickering above the rocks. They did not look like lightning. They did not flash like airplane lights. They were soft, silent, and moved slowly as if searching for something. Jonas narrowed his eyes, unsure if he was imagining it. He considered the possibility of a storm or some kind of weather phenomenon. He wasn't a man who chased mysteries, so he shrugged it off and went back to work. But the lights stayed on his mind. As he walked back toward the barn, his horses were restless. They paced inside their stalls and shook their heads, making nervous sounds. His cattle gathered close together instead of spreading out to graze. Even his old dog, Rusty, stood stiff, ears raised, looking toward the cliffs. Animals always sensed things before humans did. Jonas knew that much. That night, after finishing his chores, he sat on the wooden step outside his small house with a cup of black coffee. The desert was silent. No cars on the distant road. No coyotes howling. Not even an owl calling from the trees. It was the kind of silence that pressed against the ears like a warning. He didn't go to bed early. Something kept him awake. A strange feeling, like he was waiting for a visitor he didn't know existed. It was close to midnight when the knocking came. At first, Jonas thought it was the wind pushing a loose board on the barn, but the knocking continued, steady, sharp, and too controlled to be a random sound. He set his coffee cup down, grabbed a lantern, and made his way toward the barn. He felt the same uneasy tingle he used to feel years ago when strange things happened near the military testing grounds not far from the valley. But this felt different. This felt personal. The knocking echoed again. Jonas stopped right outside the barn door, took a slow breath, and pushed it open. What he saw nearly made him drop the lantern. Standing inside his barn were 3 young women, exhausted, frightened, and covered with dust from travel. Their clothes were simple, their faces tense, and their dark hair pulled back as if they had been running for a long time. Jonas recognized their heritage immediately. He had lived near Apache communities his whole life. These women, Sani, Kaya, and Nita, were clearly from one of the nearby reservations. But what were they doing on his land? And why so late at night? Before he could speak, the oldest of the 3, Sani, stepped forward. Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed focused on him. "Please, we need help." Jonas froze. Words didn't come easily to him on normal days, and this was far from normal. He opened his mouth, trying to ask what happened, but no sound came out. He stood there, feeling his heart pound harder than it had in years. Kaya, the second woman, added quickly, "We're not here to cause trouble. We just need a place to stay for a little while. We're being followed." Nita, the youngest, looked over her shoulder as if expecting something to burst through the barn wall at any second. "They'll find us if we stay outside." Jonas finally swallowed the knot in his throat. "Who's after you? And why come here?" Sandy glanced at the lantern in his hand, her expression softening slightly. "Because your ranch is far from town. No one comes here, and because we saw the lights last night. We thought you might know something." Jonas blinked. "Lights?" She nodded. "The ones in the sky. That's who is chasing us." Jonas stared at her, unsure if he heard correctly. "The lights? You mean aircraft?" Nita shook her head. "Not aircraft, not anything human." A cold shiver ran down Jonas's spine. He remembered the silent lights drifting above the cliffs. He remembered the way the animals reacted, the stillness of the night. Everything suddenly made sense, not in a logical way, but in a way his instincts understood. Jonas stepped aside and gestured for them to come fully inside. He shut the barn door to keep the cold out and set the lantern on a nearby table. He watched the three women closely as they caught their breath. They were tired, hungry, and scared. This wasn't a prank. It wasn't nonsense. Something real was happening. Jonas cleared his throat, trying to gather the courage to speak more than a few words. "Sit down. I'll get water." He moved slowly, as if any sudden motion might cause them to disappear like a hallucination. He poured water into metal cups and handed them out. The women drank quickly, their hands shaking. After a moment of silence, Jonas finally said, "Tell me everything." Sandy exchanged a glance with the other two, then began talking. She explained that their small Apache group had discovered strange stones buried deep in sacred land. The stones pulsed with energy, soft, warm, and alive. The elders believed the stones were a gift from the sky, something ancient and powerful. But when the stones were taken out of the ground, something else awakened. Machines appeared, silent, metallic, and not belonging to any human government. They scanned the land, searching for the ones who touched the stones, and anyone with even a trace of that energy was hunted. Sani, Kaya, and Nita had all touched the stones, and ever since, the machines had followed them. Jonas listened without interrupting. He didn't laugh. He didn't question their story. He had seen enough strange things in his life to know the world was full of secrets. Kaya leaned forward, her voice low. "They don't harm people. At first. They simply track. But when they get too close, the stone energy inside us reacts. We feel sick, weak. We can't fight them." Nita added, "We ran for 3 days. They kept coming. We hid behind cliffs, inside caves, anywhere we could. But they kept getting closer. That's why we came here. We didn't know where else to go." Jonas rubbed the back of his neck. "You chose this ranch because it's far away?" Sani shook her head. "Because something is different here. Something feels safe." Jonas wanted to deny it. He was just a rancher, a man who hadn't spoken to women in years. What could he possibly do against mysterious machines from the sky? But something inside him stirred, a feeling he hadn't felt in so long that he barely recognized it. Responsibility, purpose, courage. He looked at the three women, their tired faces illuminated by the lantern's warm glow. They were strangers. They were frightened. And they needed someone. Jonas had lived a long time thinking no one needed him anymore. But that night, everything changed. He walked to the barn door, opened it slightly, and looked outside. The desert was silent again, but the silence felt unnatural. He saw a faint glow near the cliffs, the same lights he had noticed earlier. This time, They moved in slow lines, like something sweeping the land. He closed the door quietly and turned back toward the women. "You can stay here tonight," he said. His voice was calm and steady, surprising even himself. "But if those machines come to my land, we have a problem." Sani nodded. "We understand." Jonas thought for a moment, then added, "If you're staying here, I need to know exactly what those stones did to you." Kaya opened her hand. A faint shimmer of light appeared above her palm, soft and harmless, like a warm breeze made visible. Jonas stepped back in surprise. It wasn't bright or dangerous. It was simply different. "We didn't ask for this," Kaya said softly. "We don't even understand it." Jonas stared at the light, then at the women. He felt a mixture of fear and determination rising inside him. He didn't know what he was getting into. But he knew one thing: he could not send them away. He sighed deeply and gestured toward the corner of the barn. "There's hay there, blankets. You can rest." The women nodded and sat down, exhausted. Jonas watched them for a moment. Their breathing slowed, their eyes closed. They finally relaxed. Jonas stood there in the quiet barn with only the lantern flickering beside him. He felt like the world had opened its doors to a storm he wasn't ready for. But ready or not, the storm was coming. He stepped outside again and looked toward the cliffs. The distant glow grew brighter, moving slowly but surely toward his ranch. Jonas Hale had lived alone for many years. He had forgotten what it felt like to be responsible for anyone other than himself. But tonight, everything inside him awakened: his instincts, his courage, and his long-buried sense of duty. He turned back toward the barn and whispered to himself, "I won't let anything happen to them." The desert wind blew across the land, carrying dust and the faint hum of something unnatural approaching. Jonas felt the weight of the coming danger, but he also felt something stronger, a quiet bravery he hadn't known in years. He walked back inside, checked the locks, and made sure the women were safe. For the first time in a long time, Jonas Hale wasn't alone, and the night had only just begun. Before sunrise, Jonas Hale was already awake. He hadn't slept much, not because he was frightened, but because his mind was too busy. Something inside him felt alive for the first time in years. He moved quietly around the barn, checking the tools, the locks, and the old equipment he hadn't touched in a long time. He kept glancing at the 3 sleeping women. They lay close together on a pile of hay, wrapped in blankets, finally resting after days of fear. Jonas stepped outside and breathed in the cold morning air. The horizon glowed faint orange. Usually, mornings felt peaceful on the ranch, but today the silence felt heavy, as if the ground itself was holding its breath. He walked toward the main house, grabbed a pair of binoculars he kept by the window, and scanned the cliffs. Even from a distance, he noticed faint patterns in the rocks, shadows that didn't belong to the natural shape of the land. Something metallic reflected a weak beam of light. Whatever those machines were, they were close enough to be a problem. Jonas returned to the barn just as the women began to stir. Sani woke first. She blinked slowly, trying to understand where she was. When she saw Jonas nearby, she sat up, her expression calm but serious. "Are they here?" she asked quietly. "Not yet," Jonas replied, "but they're close." Soon, Kaya and Nita woke too. They washed their faces with water Jonas brought and sat together near the barn entrance. Jonas could tell they were trying not to show fear, but their eyes gave away everything. They were tired of running, tired of hiding, but still determined. Jonas poured warm tea into metal cups and handed them out. They thanked him softly. He noticed they avoided looking at the wide desert. It was as if the land itself reminded them of danger. Finally, Jonas spoke. "If they come here, I can't let them roam freely. The ranch is big. We need to decide how to protect the place." Nita glanced at him. Confusion and hope mixed in her eyes. "You're going to help us fight?" Jonas scratched his beard. "I'm no soldier, but I know this land better than anyone, and my ranch has survived storms, floods, coyotes, and everything nature has thrown at it. Machines from the sky might be new, but danger isn't." Kaya looked relieved. "Thank you. We didn't expect anyone to help." Jonas simply nodded, unable to say more. He wasn't used to praise. They spent the morning preparing. Jonas showed the women the layout of the ranch, the open fields, the windmill, the water tank, the old machinery scattered behind the barn, and the hidden dips in the ground where rainwater sometimes collected. His explanation was simple, but the women listened with full attention. Every detail mattered. Jonas walked to the shed and opened it. Inside were old tools, rusted metal pieces, coils of wire, broken tractors, and unused planks of wood. Most people would see junk, but Jonas saw possibilities. "We can block off some areas," he said, pointing to the scattered equipment. "Machines will try to move in straight lines. They won't expect messy terrain. They won't expect me." Sani gave a small smile. "You are very calm." "This is my home," Jonas replied softly. "I've taken care of it all my life. I won't let anything bad touch it." By noon, Jonas had created a network of simple traps. Nothing dangerous, only enough to slow anything down. Deep holes covered with old boards, chains stretched between fence posts, loose metal sheets placed in tall grass to reflect sunlight and confuse sensors. The women helped him carry materials, working with quiet determination even though their legs were tired. While they worked, Jonas noticed something remarkable. The faint glow around the women's hands appeared again when they lifted heavy objects or helped him repair broken fences. It was not bright or harmful. It was gentle, almost like a warm spark of energy that strengthened their movements. They didn't seem fully aware of how it worked. During a short break, Jonas finally asked, "What exactly does the stone energy do to you?" Sani looked at her hands, the soft glow fading as she relaxed. "It gives strength when we need it. It sharpens our senses. But it also drains us if the machines get too close." Kaya added, "The energy reacts to theirs. When their scanners aim at us, it feels like our breath is taken away." Nita hugged her knees. "It hurts, like something pulling at our chest." Jonas listened carefully. He wasn't a scientist, but he understood enough to know that keeping the women far from the machines was the key. "Then we'll keep them away," he said firmly. Afternoon sunlight stretched across the land, and the air grew warmer. Jonas climbed onto the roof of the barn with the binoculars, scanning again. His heart tightened when he saw shapes moving along the cliffside. Long, smooth bodies of metal hovered just a few feet above the ground. They moved like animals, searching, sweeping the land with slow beams of pale light. He climbed down quickly. "They're coming." The women looked at each other with fear, but this time they didn't run. They followed Jonas as he guided them toward a safe spot behind the barn, a narrow pit he had covered with wooden boards. The pit was deep enough to hide them from direct view, but safe and comfortable enough for them to breathe easily. "You stay here," Jonas said. "I'll draw them away from this area." Nita grabbed his arm before he walked away. "What if they find you?" Jonas gave her a small, steady smile. "I've lived through worse things than strange machines. I know my land. They don't." He walked away before they could argue. Jonas moved carefully across the ranch, making sure the machines would detect him before they detected the women. He wasn't trying to fight them. He just wanted to distract them, confuse them, and lead them into the messy parts of the ranch that would slow them down. Soon, the first machine appeared over the hills, floating silently. Its metal surface reflected the sun like polished stone. It scanned the ground with a slow-moving beam. Jonas watched it approach with calm eyes. The moment the beam touched one of the traps, an old metal sheet lying in the grass, the machine hesitated. The reflected light bounced off and confused its sensors. It moved left, searching again. Jonas stepped out onto open ground, waving his arms. The machine turned toward him instantly. "Good," Jonas muttered. "Come on." He ran toward the windmill, knowing the rough terrain there would slow the machine. Behind him, he could hear the faint hum of its engines as it followed. Every now and then, the machine paused to scan the ground, but Jonas made sure to stay in its view. 2 more machines appeared in the distance. Jonas felt his heartbeat rise but didn't stop. He moved from one side of the ranch to the other, making himself an easy target so they wouldn't scan the hidden pit. Then, something unexpected happened. As Jonas passed near a stack of old wooden crates, a soft light shot across the field. It was not from the machines. It came from the direction of the pit. Sani had stepped out. She held her glowing hand high, and the energy pulsed in a wide arc, casting a gentle wave through the air. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't harmful. But it made the machines pause, almost confused, as if they could not make sense of the new signal. Kaya and Nita joined her. The 3 women stood close together, their combined energy forming a faint, shimmering barrier around them. Jonas felt fear rise in his chest. "Get back in the pit," he shouted. "It's too dangerous." But the women didn't retreat. "We can't hide forever," Sani said, her voice shaking but firm. "We have to face them too." The machines came closer, circling the open field. Their beams tightened, focusing on the cluster of energy the women emitted. Jonas rushed back toward them, breath heavy, sweat dripping down his face. Suddenly, the ground vibrated. A larger machine descended from the cliffs. It was shaped like a smooth stone, hovering silently with a soft blue glow. This one was different, stronger, faster, more aware. Jonas instinctively stepped in front of the women, arms wide, ready to block anything that came near. The large machine lowered itself until it was only a few feet above the ground. A soft hum filled the air. Jonas felt a pressure in his ears, as if the air was tightening around him. The women clutched their chests. Their energy flickered and dimmed. Jonas knew this was the moment he had to act. He reached down and grabbed a heavy metal chain from the ground. It wasn't a weapon, but it was something. He swung it with full force at one of the smaller machines. The chain struck the metal surface and caused a loud ringing sound. The machine jerked sideways, its scanner light flickering. Jonas swung again, shouting with raw determination. He wasn't strong enough to damage the machine, but he was strong enough to disrupt it. The large machine turned toward him. The scanning beam brightened. Sani, Kaya, and Nita took each other's hands. Their combined energy flared again, brighter than before. The light traveled through the air like a slow wave, touching the large machine and causing its lights to flicker. Jonas stepped back, shielding his eyes. The machine's hum grew louder, then suddenly cracked with a sharp sound. The scanning lights shut off. All at once, every machine froze. Then, slowly, they began pulling back. The large one drifted upward, rising toward the cliffs. The smaller ones followed, their earlier confidence gone. They retreated. Jonas stood still, breathing hard. The women slowly lowered their hands, their glow fading. The light around them evaporated into the air. The desert became quiet again. Jonas looked at the women, disbelief and relief mixing in his chest. "You did it," he whispered. Sani shook her head. "No, we did it together." The sun began to set, painting the sky in soft gold and red. Jonas guided the women back to the ranch house. They walked slowly, tired but safe. For the first time in days, the women smiled. Small, peaceful smiles that held gratitude and hope. Jonas felt something inside him shift. He had protected them. They had trusted him, and together they had survived something none of them could have faced alone. That night, the ranch was no longer silent. Jonas cooked a simple meal, and the 4 of them sat at the table. There was laughter, soft, shy laughter, but real. It filled the room with warmth he hadn't felt in years. Sanny looked at him gently. "Jonas, we don't want to leave." Kaya added, "Your ranch, it feels like home now." Nita nodded. "We feel safe with you." Jonas didn't know what to say, but inside he already knew the answer. They could stay. The ranch had been quiet for too long. Now it finally felt alive, and Jonas Hale, the man who thought he would live alone forever, had found something unexpected, new purpose, new company, and a future he never imagined. The desert night wrapped around the ranch like a soft blanket. For the first time in years, Jonas did not feel alone. He had 3 new lives to protect, 3 new reasons to keep going, and he would protect them no matter what came next.